Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's weekly vlog is going to be a fun one where I have my dogs choose my TBR. I did this video a couple of months ago now where I read 4 books, had one of my dogs choose 2 of them and my other dog choose the other 2, and it turns out that they have surprisingly good taste. It was a really fun vlog. I had a lot of fun reading all 4 of the books, so I figured let's just go ahead and have them pick out some books again. I have a lot of physical books checked out from the library on my TBR right now, so I figured instead of me trying to figure out which ones to read next and suffering decision paralysis, I will let my dogs do the hard work. I will let them choose which books that I read this week, and hopefully this vlog goes just as well as last time. So how this vlog is going to work is I am going to have 3 books laid out. I am going to put a little treat on each of them, and then I'm going to have one of my dogs run and grab whichever treat that they want, and whichever treat they grab first is going to be the book that I read next. So I have 2 dogs, Bruce and Obi, and they're each going to pick 2 books for me this week. The first pick is going to be Bruce's pick. He's older, so oldest sibling gets seniority here. Let's go ahead and have him pick out a book. So Bruce picked Hide by Kiersten. I think this is a really good summer horror. This is about, it's about an abandoned amusement park, and I believe 14 people are chosen to participate in a game of hide and seek that turns deadly. They're all competing for a huge cash prize, and they don't realize that only one person will be left standing by the end means that one person will be left alive by the end. So I'm very intrigued. It's a shorter one as well. I'm excited that Bruce picked this one because I was going to add it on my summer read TBR and it just missed the cut barely. So I'm going to go read the first 50% of Hide, and I will then check back in and let y'all know how I'm liking this one. So it is the same day as the last clip. That's one of the great things about starting a vlog on Sunday, is that I have a lot of time to read, and in particular get 50% of the way through Hide. I am really enjoying this one. This one is not only shorter, but it's a very fast-paced, very readable. The setup of the story where we have 14 people all in the same competition, they're all hiding, they're all trying to basically play this big game of hide and seek, and the last one standing wins, and I'm really enjoying the progress so far. The setting of the abandoned theme park is really cool. We get to see, we do have a main character, Mac, but we do also briefly get to see inside the heads of pretty much all of the other contestants, which I was not expecting. So that's fun because at the beginning of each day we get to see like the thought process behind a couple of different characters and where they're hiding, but not only where they're hiding, which is really fun to see the amusement park setting, but we get to see a little bit about them and why they would agree to do this thing. And it's surprisingly character driven for, again, such a short book. I think this is less than 300 pages. Yeah, the acknowledgements end on page 240. So this is a really short one. I'm absolutely flying through it. I'm having a lot of fun. I don't really have too much more to say about it other than the fact that I am enjoying it. At the 50% mark, we start getting clues as to maybe what is behind this game, who is behind this game, and what is actually happening behind the scenes. So I'm really intrigued. I did have some idea. There have been some Easter eggs in here, and I also went into this one kind of familiar with this author's writing style and the way in which she blends a little bit of paranormal into her horror. So I'm very intrigued to see how this is going to wrap up. I'm very invested in who's going to win this competition, if anyone's going to win this competition, and who's going to get eliminated next. So I am going to continue reading this. I honestly think that I might finish this today. I think I'll have my update be tomorrow morning. I think I'm gonna finish this book in an entire day. Again, it's short, it's very readable. I'm having a lot of fun with it. so I did end up finishing Hyde in a single day. This is definitely a fast-paced book that lends itself really well to that type of reading. I had a fun time. I will mention, because I don't think this is a spoiler, it's more of a subgenre. This is a paranormal thriller, so if you do not like paranormal or supernatural elements, don't pick this up. I think that some people feel like that's a spoiler to let you all know, but it's on the dust jacket that this is a supernatural thriller, and I don't know a lot of people who go into a thriller not expecting a supernatural thriller enjoying supernatural thrillers. So just know that if you are someone who likes your horror or thriller rooted in the everyday and does not like any sort of paranormal or otherworldly elements, skip this one. I don't think you'll like the twist at all, and I think that this is probably not going to be a book that you would enjoy. I really enjoyed the pacing of this one. It was definitely like strange. I wasn't expecting to get so attached to so many of these characters because, again, shorter book, lots of protagonists, lots of people being entered into this game, but I had a fun time. This book is super summery as well. It takes place in July, so I don't know when this vlog is coming out. It's either going to be late July or early August, but if you're looking for a fun summery horror thriller, this definitely checks those boxes. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I'm definitely going to be checking out every single adult release that Kiersten White comes out with. Now, this is an author that I had previously picked up a book from her. She has a lot of YA. I think mostly fantasy, but I think there might be like some horror-ish paranormal stuff in there as well. So I had picked up a YA from this author and DNF'd it, but last year I picked up Mr. Magic, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed this one, so definitely if you're like in the same boat as me and maybe you've tried out this author's like YA work and you weren't a fan of it, you still might like her adult work, because I was really pleasantly surprised by both this and Mr. Magic. So definitely a great first pick for the vlog. Bruce did a really good job. Now it's Obi's turn. Let's see what he picks. So Obi saw Bruce's pick, listened to my update, and said, I'm gonna pick something that you can't fly through in a day, and he picked My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I'm really excited about this one. It's been on my TBR forever. I have been really craving it. It was a summerween hopeful for me, but I think now is the time. In fact, I know now is the time because Obi picked this one out. So this one is 400 pages, so definitely gonna be a little bit longer of a read than Hyde. I also think this one is more slower paced. This is the first book in a slasher trilogy. We're following 18-year-old Jade Daniels, and she is obsessed with slasher films, with horror movies. She's a little bit of an odd duck in a town that does not really encourage odd ducks or encourage anything other than conforming to the norms of society. So she is a little bit of an outcast, but when things start mirroring a real-life slasher movie, will her encyclopedic knowledge of horror and slasher cinema save her? So I've heard wonderful things. I'm so excited to dive into this one. So I'm gonna get to the 50% mark and I will let y'all know how Obi's first pick is going. So I am now 50% of the way through My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, and this one is definitely a very different reading experience than Hyde. Hyde was one where I felt like reading it all in one go was the way to go because it was so fast-paced and so compelling. I read it like in a day. This one I feel very differently about, and that has nothing to do with my enjoyment of either book. However, I've just been noticing this one, like, I really want to take my time with in particular just because there are so many Easter eggs and like like nods and references to different slasher movies. Like, it's not just Jade, our main character, talking about slashers, people's last names, little throwaway lines. There are so many Easter eggs and references in here, so it has been such a fun time reading this one. And I love that I'm actually able to get like a lot of these references, because I don't think I watched a lot of slashers. I talked about this briefly in my Summerween reading vlog, but I did not watch like a ton of slashers until maybe about like 2-ish years ago, and then I like have been going back and watching some of the classics and also just more slashers in general. But I'm enjoying this one. We are following our main character Jade as she suspects that she is about to become a character in a real life slasher. There are things happening in her town and some maybe mysterious disappearances, along with like a new development being built on the town, that she believes that like a slasher is going to happen in real life. However, she's not the most reliable main character for a lot of reasons. The town does not perceive her as like a very reliable person, and because she is so obsessed with slasher movies, no one takes her seriously, but she takes herself seriously. And it's very, very interesting. It's slower paced, even though this is like an ode to slashers. It's about slashers. This is more like on the slower side as opposed to other slasher books that I've read in the past, but I think it's so fascinating. I love in between every chapter we get a snippet from Jade's assignments. Her history teacher lets her write assignments on whatever she wants, so she's been writing like these slasher 101 essays that we get to read, and not only do we gain more knowledge about slashers, which could be especially important if you haven't seen a lot of slashers, but also you gain a lot of insight about Jade and who she is as a character. So I'm really enjoying it. She is definitely a very interesting main character to follow. She is just so convinced that there is going to be a slasher that's going to happen, and she thinks that she's found the final girl, and she's trying to convince this final girl that she's going to be a final girl, and it's not going well. No one is taking this well, as she's trying to convince everyone that slasher movies can be in real life and they're all living the plot of one. So I'm having a lot of fun. I'm really having a lot of fun. I think if you watch a lot of horror movies, in particular slashers, you're going to enjoy this more just because of all of the Easter eggs and nods to other works, and of course constant references by both our narrator Jade and then Stephen Graham Jones to slasher movies as a whole. But yeah, I'm enjoying this. I'm gonna go finish this up, and I will check back in when I've completed this and let y'all know my final thoughts. Okay, so I finished My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones last night. I really enjoyed this reading experience, and I'm really excited to dive into the rest of this series later on this year. Jade is definitely one of the most memorable characters that I have definitely read this year, but just in general, like one of the most well-developed and unique characters that I've had the pleasure of reading in quite some time. I really enjoyed this book. I will say a little bit of an uneven reading experience for me. The last 30% of this book is perfection, and it is a little bit of a slower start. It takes a little bit to get going, but once it does, it's absolutely incredible. So I'm really looking forward to checking out the next 2 books in the series. I have no idea like what they're going to be on, because this wraps up fairly nicely. However, like a lot of slasher franchises, you know, the first movie or the first book does wrap up nicely, and then we get other things happening in later installments. So I'm really intrigued to see where this story and to see where Jade's story is going from here. So overall, I really enjoyed this one. For this book, I would recommend you pick it up physically. It was not a badly produced production, and this is nothing against the audiobook narrator that they chose, but the audiobook narrator that they chose for this audiobook has a very mature voice. It sounds like she is more mature, she's older, and Jade not only is a younger character, she's fresh out of high school, she's 17 years old, but the narration style in this is so like upbeat and conversational and young sounding, and I just thought the audiobook was just a little at odds with that. Again, the narrator's voice was absolutely lovely. She did a great job. In another reading experience, I would have enjoyed it. However, I just felt like she just didn't sound like Jade to me, and I think, you know, in part that's just because when I was reading this book, Jade has such a clear character voice, and I think that's such a wonderful thing that Stephen Graham Jones was able to do, was create a character that felt so real to me that when I heard someone else like reading her lines, I was like, that's not Jade. I know what Jade sounds like in my head. Like, she feels very real to me. So yeah, I enjoyed this overall, and I'm really intrigued to read the next book in this series. It's not going to happen in this vlog, but it's definitely going to happen sooner rather than later because I had a fun time with this one. So first two books, they've been going really well for me, and I'm really excited to see what Bruce picks next. So let's go ahead and pick out that third book. The third book is now chosen. I don't know if you noticed this time around, I tried to pick 3 books that all had like very similar colored covers. I'm trying to like not rig this as much as possible. I was a little nervous. I thought for a minute that Bruce was only choosing like the very first book out of the 3, and that's not the case. He ended up choosing the middle book this time, but I tried to pick 3 books, and I'm gonna keep trying like to give my dogs a selection with covers that look similar to each other, at least with the primary cover. I'm always so curious to see which book my dogs gravitate towards because I put the little functional morsels, they're like right by me, so I don't want to say the word that starts with a T, but I always put like the little functional morsels on the books like pretty much at the same time, so it's always interesting to see which one they gravitate towards first. And I tried this time around to have all of the books be like the same color, so it was a little bit more of an even playing field. But all that being said, Bruce chose We Used to Live Here. This one has been getting so much buzz around Instagram. I think Mother Horror talked about it. I've just been seeing a ton of Instagram people. I'm sure maybe on BookTube as well, but especially on Instagram, I have seen this book taking Instagram by storm. I've seen so many people talking about this, loving it. I believe this used to be like a Reddit story, and I think it's already in production for a movie, which is crazy. So I'm intrigued. This is a haunted house story. That's all I know about it. I'm guessing by the title, it says We Used to Live Here, so I don't know. I'm intrigued. I'm gonna go into this not knowing anything except that a lot of people are loving it. It's a haunted house story, and I'm intrigued. Yeah, I just saw in the dust jacket, it says Get Out meets Parasite in this eerily haunting debut and Reddit hit, soon to be a major motion picture. I am so intrigued. Let's get to reading, and I will check back in at the 50% mark and let y'all know how I'm enjoying this one. So I am 50% of the way through this one, and I have a really great feeling, in part because I had to like physically stop reading. Sometimes, especially during these kind of vlogs where I have specific percentage checkpoints, sometimes I'll get to the 50% and be like, okay, great, let's do an update. However, last night I got to the 50% point and I was like, what if I just read the whole thing? It's getting very interesting, and I have no idea where the story is going. Well, I have some idea, but the concepts that are introduced in here are really very creepy. When I started this one, while I was reading the first chapter, I thought it was okay. I didn't really understand why this one is blowing up so much, but then I kept reading, it kept getting creepier and creepier, and I do understand why so many people are absolutely loving this one. With a caveat, I will say this is its Get Out meets Parasite. I don't think so at all. Sometimes those comp titles really work, and I get maybe why that this would be compared to those, especially because this is already getting turned into a movie, but I don't know, like Get Out and Parasite are very different than what this story is. Maybe that'll all change in the last 50%, but for right now, I mean, I can think of another Jordan Peele movie that if we were using movie comp titles that I would compare it to more. I still wouldn't compare it to like a Jordan Peele movie just in terms of like plot and what happens, but if I were, I would compare it to another one, but I'm not gonna spoil it. But I don't know. I don't get Out vibes just yet. I feel like in particular, Get Out is a very buzzy title that people use all the time for a comp title, and it very rarely is relevant. So I'm intrigued about that. But we are following our two main characters, Charlie and Eve. They flip houses for a living. They've bought this very beautiful isolated house. They are fixing up the house. One night, Eve is alone by herself. Charlie has gone to town to pick up some activities and some dinner to have a really fun Friday night, and Eve gets a knock at the door. At this door is a family, and the father says that, like the title suggests, we used to live here. This was his childhood home, and they were in the area, and could maybe they stop in and just look at the house, take a little house tour so he can show his wife and children, because he's with his wife and their 3 small children, and just show them like where he grew up. Eve has a little bit of a hesitation about this, but she's like, okay, this is a whole family, why not? It'll be 15 minutes. Well, the visit does not last 15 minutes, and it gets weirder from there. And that's all you really need to know going into this one. I know I mentioned I wasn't a fan of the comp titles. I don't think that they sell this book like well with the right expectations. However, the cover of this one, all I'll say is that the cover of this one is great. I think it's a perfect cover for this book. That's all I'll say on it. I'm really excited to dive into this one and finish it up. I anticipate finishing up today because I'm really intrigued. I need to find out what is going to happen next in this one. So that is what I'm going to do. I am going to dive into this one, and I will check back in when I finish and let y'all know my final thoughts. So I finished We Used to Live Here. The dogs are now 3 for 3 with picking out books that I really enjoyed reading. I mentioned before the Get Out and the Parasite of it all. Don't go into that expecting those. Honestly, a better comp title for this one would have to be House of Leaves. And I know that those are huge shoes to fill. I know House of Leaves has like entire subreddits dedicated to it and a very dedicated fan base, but you know, I think obviously it's not the same length as House of Leaves. It doesn't go as far as House of Leaves goes. This is quite a bit shorter, but just if you like a story about a house, and if you like the chapters interwoven with documents and kind of a little bit of an epistolary formatting where we have chapters and then maybe we'll get a news bulletin or a transcript of a police interview, like different little documents interspersed throughout a very creepy house story, I think you would like it. So instead of the comp titles of Get Out or Parasite, which I've actually seen that the Get Out has been dropped from like Storygraph, it no longer says Get Out. It says The Turn of the Key meets Parasite, but my dust jacket of this one says Get Out. So I just want to reiterate, not that one, but kind of like a House of Leaves light experience. I personally did not love House of Leaves, but I did really enjoy this one. So maybe if you liked the concept of House of Leaves and just don't want something that intense, that in-depth, maybe check this one out. When I say I was so invested in this one, maybe you saw it in the B-roll, but especially the documents in between every single chapter. Like, I was looking up Morse code to try and decipher some things that were in here. I was looking up Norwegian to try and transcribe some of the footnotes in here. I was on a mission and I was committed to try and figure out some of these mysteries. I had a great reading experience. It was a lot of fun. I can't say that for every book that I had my phone right next to me, like doing my own research to try and uncover some of the mysteries. So this book was a lot of fun in that aspect. I will say the ending is ambiguous. If ambiguous endings are a deal breaker for you, I don't know. I don't know if you'd like this one. I enjoyed it. I do wish I felt like this could have been 500 pages, honestly. We still do have questions, a lot of questions at the end of this book. Some of those things I'm okay with being up in the air and wondering about and really really just being so curious about the nature of everything that happened in here. I'm okay with some. With others, I do wish we could have explored a little bit more. In particular, there is a secondary location and a character that just didn't get like fully explored. I could see this, you know, maybe not getting like a sequel in the traditional sense, but maybe like a continuation, because I still have so many questions. I have so many questions, but this had some very terrifying imagery. I would also like to see if I could find the original Reddit story. I think it was originally on Reddit No Sleep. I would like to read that and maybe see what the differences were. I don't know, maybe that adds some extra clarity or not. I don't know. But overall, this was an amazing debut. This book is going to make such a good movie. This is such a visual book. I could picture so much while I was reading it, and some of the concepts I just think are going to be so creepy when adapted into a movie. So I can't wait to watch the movie. I'm glad that I read it. I get why this is sweeping booktube by storm. Overall, a great debut. Can't wait to check out more by the author. I wish we had a little bit more resolution. Like I just said, this could be 500 pages. I would not have gotten bored. There's so much to discover here, and there's so much that fascinates me and that I feel like we don't have answers. So I'm really crossing my fingers for a continuation of this. Like I said, without giving too much away, I don't really want there to be a direct sequel to this book, but kind of just exploring some of the concepts and like the world that this is set in, I think would be really cool for a continuation. So I had a great time. Now let's check in with Obi and see what he's picking. So Obi picked what I believe is the shortest book on my physical TBR at the moment, and that is Craft Stories I Wrote for the Devil by Ananda Lima. And this one is like a collection of short stories, like the title says, that like the author wrote for the devil, I think. So at a Halloween party in 1999, a writer slept with the devil. She sees him again and again throughout her life, and she writes stories for him about things that are both impossible and true. So this one is a collection of short stories. I wonder if they're all going to be, like if there's going to be a main narrative that connects all of these short stories together, because it's talking about how the author wrote all these for the devil. I don't know. A couple of months ago, I would have said that I'm nervous for this one because I don't tend to love short stories. However, this year, the short story collections have been killing it, and I've really been getting into shorter form horror. It is short. The acknowledgements end on a page 179, so I do anticipate getting to the 50% mark today. So I'm going to go read this, and I will check back in later with my thoughts. Okay, so I am halfway through Craft. It did take me a little bit longer than I was expecting to get halfway through this. Me and my partner have just been really wrapped up and invested in the Olympics, but I am now halfway through this one, and it's okay. It is a short story collection that's kind of interconnected, so there is like a little interlude between every single short story where we are following this author, and it feels a little bit meta in some way because this unnamed author meets the devil at a party, and that is the premise for the first short story in here. But we do follow like the author and her interactions with the devil throughout her life in these interludes, and then we also get short stories that sometimes do mention her relationship with the devil. And it is interesting, however, this has been really heavily marketed as horror, and I do believe, just because the title also says devil in it, that when you think of devil or demonic horror, I feel like a lot of times there's There's a certain experience, certain tropes, certain feelings that you expect when you go into a horror book that has to deal with the devil, and this one feels a lot more, I would almost say, like magical realism, or potentially more of a literary horror. Like when it's talking about the devil in here is very different than the devil you see in Rosemary's Baby, for example. The stories here feel very much a blend of literary fiction and magical realism, and honestly, I don't have any problems with that. I did have to kind of temper my expectations because I was going into this one hoping for like really scary short stories and like unsettling short stories, because horror short stories have really been working for me this year, as I mentioned earlier on, and these ones, they definitely feel, the only one that I'd say at this point that feels very unsettling and very horrific. So out of the 4 short stories that I've read so far, Anthropophaga is the one that I would say is like the most unsettling and horrific. The other ones, Rapture, Ghost Story, Tropicalia, those are all definitely, they touch on like horror themes, and just the way that they're explored is definitely, it feels like a lot more like darker magical realism than really horrific. And that's not to say that just because something isn't scary doesn't make it horror, but I was reading the blurbs on the back of this one. I think Julia Fine does a great job of describing this one. It's uncanny, and it also says that this has clean and marvelous prose of a decorated poet. I agree with that. John Keane on the back of this one also says that it's trippy, eerie, wry, and always profound. So for the second half of this short story collection, I definitely have a better expectation. I know more of what I'm getting into and what these stories are going to be about. I also got the audiobook from my library, so I'm going to try the audiobook and kind of see if any of those mesh more with me, because so far I am enjoying this reading experience, but none of the short stories have really grabbed and captured me like I was anticipating them. So hopefully the next 50% of this just goes a little bit better for me, but overall it is a very beautiful collection. I believe this author has written poetry before, and this is her short story debut, so the writing is very beautiful, very rich, and I'm enjoying those parts of it, but we'll see how the next 50% of this one goes for me. Okay, so I finally finished Craft, and I do kind of feel the same as I was feeling during the 50% mark for this one. I have a feeling that this is going to get such a mixed reception. I think it is getting a mixed reception. This is a fairly new release. It did come out, I believe, at the beginning of July, either that or June, but I just think based on the pushing of the devil element and saying this is a collection of horror short stories, I think a lot of people are going to pick this up, expect like horrifying short stories, and then kind of be disappointed. And then I think a lot of people who would really enjoy this maybe would be turned off by the marketing that it is a horror collection of short stories, because while I do think that there are some horror elements in here, I could go on all day about how horror is very subjective and it doesn't have to be necessarily like the most scary thing for you to be considered horror. I do think there are some short stories in here, you know, that are very horror adjacent. I would also say more just like magical realism. There's ghosts, there's the devil. There's this one very interesting short story about a vending machine that vends very interesting things. So we definitely do have a little bit of horror and speculative elements. However, a lot of this is very literary slice of life, and honestly, like the title says, I think we should focus on the craft part of the title rather than the stories told or written for the devil part, because this to me feels like a collection of short stories about craft and the craft of creating art, whether that be writing short stories or photography or painting, drawing, whatever medium that you as an artist use to create or craft your art. This very much felt like a collection geared more towards that than like creepy stories about the devil and like demonic horror forces. So I did think this was very beautifully written. It is so clear that this author has written poetry before. It's very lyrical slice of life. There are some short stories that lean more towards literary slice of life and don't really have any speculative elements at all. So not every story in here does have that magical realism speculative element, but I do also want to mention a large part of this, particularly in the last 50%, does have to deal with COVID. And I know that is a big trigger for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like reading about it. I'm kind of 50-50. Sometimes I think it really helps with a story. Like, I don't mind if COVID is used as a setting. Like, for example, there's an Andrea Bart's, I think, thriller where COVID is used as a reason why these people are kept in a house together. I don't mind it like that because it's not about COVID. It's just used as a way to keep people isolated. This one was really focusing on the loss aspect and the fear and turbulent times of living through the first few months of a global pandemic in New York City. So if that is like triggering, I would maybe skip this one because it is a little bit COVID heavy in terms of a book where maybe you would pick it up expecting devil elements and not necessarily it be grounded and rooted so much in reality. But overall, I think this is a good little short story collection. It definitely wasn't what I was expecting. I hope that as more people read it and talk about it, that it gets into the hands of more people that are really going to love this one, because I think people who love poetry, who love lit fic, who love slice of life lit fic, I think could really love this one. I do wish that it was a little bit more speculative overall. I also thought the concept of the writer writing these for the devil was cool, so I wanted more of like the little vignettes in between the short stories. I thought that was really compelling. I wanted more, but overall I thought this was a very unique read, and I'm really glad that I'm like pushing my own boundaries, or rather I guess Obi was pushing my boundaries with this pick and starting to pick up more short stories and maybe more things that I wouldn't have prioritized reading in the past. So overall, I had a really fun time with this vlog. I think Bruce and Obi picked out 4 really different and 4 really good books. I do think my favorite book of the vlog was We Used to Live Here. I have to give this one the title of the best book that I read in this vlog because I was so invested. I was decoding things and really passionate about finding the answers and invested in the mystery. There were really scary moments to this one, so thank you, Bruce, for picking a really good pick. This is probably one of my favorite horror books of the year, and I am so excited to check out the movie adaptation. So if you're watching this vlog and you take one book recommendation from this vlog, take Bruce's pick of We Used to Live Here. But that is going to be it for this vlog. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Let me know which dog picked the better books, which dog picked the books that you would be most interested in. I personally think they both did a really good job, but you know, what book out of this vlog are you most looking forward to reading? Or if you've read any of them, which ones did you like? Be sure to subscribe for all of the horror, bookish, and cozy gaming content. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!